The conference room on the 42nd floor went silent when the legal team projected a 4-year-old social media post onto the wall. At the end of the table sat Yosef Ward, 37 years old, a night shift maintenance technician most people in Cleveland would walk past without a second glance. To the world, he was the man who drove an aging Ford Ranger, carried a dented lunchbox, and worked while everyone else slept. What they didn't know was that Yosef now controlled the company acquiring the platform that hosted that post. The post was still there. The woman who wrote it had no idea who was about to decide its future. And then Yosef quietly asked for the complete audit file. If you're watching from somewhere in the world today, let me know your country and your local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where these stories reach. And if you like stories about quiet people who refuse to stay down, subscribe to the channel and join us for the journey ahead. The people who worked in the Hartwell Commerce Center knew Yosef Ward for exactly 3 things. He arrived before sunset. He left after sunrise. And if something broke, eventually Yosef would fix it. The building stood in downtown Cleveland, 12 stories of glass-steel insurance offices, accounting firms, and law practices. During business hours, hundreds of people moved through its lobby every day. Most never noticed the maintenance staff. Yosef preferred it that way. At 6:40 every evening, his old blue Ford Ranger rolled into the employee parking lot behind the building. The truck had over 200,000 miles on it. Rust had started creeping along the rear wheel wells. One of the speakers didn't work anymore. He never complained about it. The truck started every day. That was enough. At 6:55 p.m., he would step through the service entrance carrying the same dented metal lunchbox he had used for nearly a decade. The security guards always nodded. "Evening, Yosef! Evening!" That was usually the entire conversation. By 7 o'clock, most office workers were heading home to their families. Yosef's workday was just beginning. Some nights he repaired HVAC systems. Some nights he replaced electrical panels. Some nights he crawled through maintenance tunnels beneath the building where nobody else wanted to go. The work was dirty. The pay was average. And to outside observers, it looked like a life that wasn't going anywhere, especially after what happened with Vanessa Brooks. The story had spread farther than Yosef ever expected. Even people who barely knew him seemed to know fragments of it. The maintenance guy, the influencer girlfriend, the breakup, the viral post. Nobody ever said everything directly. They didn't need to. People had a way of communicating through glances, through half smiles, through conversations that stopped when someone entered the room. Yosef noticed all of it. He simply chose not to respond. One Thursday night, he was replacing emergency lighting fixtures on the 10th floor when Derek Lawson walked in. Derek was the facilities manager. 41 years old, loud, confident, the kind of man who believed volume and authority were the same thing. He looked up at Yosef standing on a ladder. "Still here, huh?" Yosef tightened a screw. "Looks that way." Derek laughed. "Man, you've got consistency, I'll give you that." Yosef didn't answer. Derek leaned against the wall. "You ever think about doing something bigger?" The question sounded casual. It wasn't. Yosef had heard versions of it for years. He climbed down the ladder. "What do you mean?" Derek shrugged. "I don't know, starting a business, management, something." Yosef placed his tools into a canvas bag. "This pays the bills." "Sure." The word lingered. "Sure." The kind of sure that really meant no. Derek smiled. "Just seems like you've been doing the same thing forever." Yosef nodded once. Then he returned to work. Conversation over. Derek eventually walked away. He never noticed that Yosef carried a laptop worth more than his truck. He never noticed the technical books stacked inside Yosef's locker. He never noticed the notebooks filled with handwritten diagrams and code architecture sketches. Most people never looked closely enough. Around 2:15 a.m., Yosef finished his shift inspection and headed to the break room. The room was empty, just the hum of vending machines and fluorescent lights. He opened his lunchbox. Turkey sandwich, apple, bottle of water, simple, predictable, exactly how he liked it. As he ate, he opened a notebook. Page after page contained neat handwriting, flowcharts, system structures, network designs, ideas. The pages represented thousands of hours of work nobody knew existed. Yosef studied them every night, not because someone told him to, not because success was guaranteed, because he had learned something years earlier. Progress rarely looked impressive while it was happening. Outside, snow drifted across Cleveland streets. Inside, Yosef quietly added another page of notes. Then another, then another. By 4 o'clock, he was back underground inspecting mechanical systems. By 6:30, the first office workers began arriving. They stepped into warm elevators and brightly lit hallways without thinking about what made those things work. Yosef preferred it that way. Invisible people heard everything, and invisible people were rarely interrupted. At 7:18 a.m., his shift finally ended. He drove west toward Lakewood. Traffic moved slowly along Interstate 90. The sky above Lake Erie glowed pale gray. The city looked tired, so did Yosef. But exhaustion never seemed to bother him. His apartment building sat on a quiet residential street. Nothing special. 3 floors. Aging brick exterior. Small parking lot. Affordable rent. He climbed the stairs to Unit 3B. Inside, the apartment reflected the same philosophy as everything else in his life. Functional, organized, minimal. The couch had come from a second-hand store. The dining table was scratched. The television was old. No expensive decorations. No luxury furniture. No attempts to impress anyone. Yet one room looked completely different. The second bedroom. The door remained closed whenever visitors came over. Nobody entered it. Nobody asked about it. Inside sat multiple monitors, server equipment, technical manuals, whiteboards covered in notes, a powerful workstation, stacks of hard drives, network diagrams pinned to the wall. This room told a completely different story, the story nobody saw. Yosef placed his keys on the desk. Then he checked several dashboards. Numbers appeared on the screens, traffic reports, security logs, performance metrics. He reviewed each one carefully. The concentration in his eyes changed. At work, Yosef looked like a maintenance technician. Here he looked like something else entirely. Hours passed. Eventually he stood and stretched. His gaze drifted toward a storage box sitting inside a closet. The box had remained unopened for months, maybe longer. Today, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he pulled it out. Dust covered the lid. He sat on the floor, opened it. Inside were photographs, old receipts, movie tickets, birthday cards, pieces of a life that no longer existed. He moved through them slowly. Then his hand stopped. A silver frame. The photograph inside showed 2 smiling people standing beside Lake Erie, Vanessa Brooks and Yosef Ward. The picture had been taken 6 years earlier, before the followers, before the sponsors, before the interviews, before the post. Yosef stared at the image. The apartment remained silent. Outside, morning traffic moved through Lakewood. Inside, memories began opening doors he had spent years keeping closed. And as he looked at the photograph, one specific night returned with perfect clarity. The night Vanessa first introduced him to the world she desperately wanted to join. The night everything started changing. 6 years earlier, Vanessa Brooks was not famous. She wasn't even close. She lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment on the west side of Cleveland, and spent most evenings filming videos in front of a ring light she had purchased on sale from Amazon. At the time, she had fewer than 3,000 followers across all her social media accounts. Most of her videos received a few hundred views. Many received less. But Vanessa never lacked ambition. Every morning she studied successful creators. Every afternoon she planned content. Every evening she filmed. Then she edited until midnight. The determination impressed Yosef. That was one of the reasons he fell in love with her. She dreamed big, and Yosef respected people who worked for their dreams. Back then, they looked like a normal couple. Nothing glamorous, nothing remarkable. They rented an apartment they could barely afford, shared a used dining table, split grocery bills, watched movies on an old television. Some weekends they drove along the Lake Erie shoreline with no destination in mind. The relationship felt simple, comfortable, real, at least to Yosef. Whenever Vanessa encountered a problem, he quietly solved it. When her laptop crashed before an important brand meeting, Yosef repaired it overnight. When she couldn't afford a new camera, Yosef spent 3 months saving money and bought one for her birthday. When she needed help filming content, Yosef stood behind the camera. When she needed thumbnails edited, Yosef learned basic design software. When she needed transportation to networking events in Columbus or Pittsburgh, Yosef drove. He never appeared in the videos, never asked for credit, never complained about the time. The support felt natural to him. If someone mattered, you helped them. That was how Yosef viewed relationships. Vanessa's audience slowly grew. 3,000 followers became 10,000. 10,000 became 25,000. Brands started noticing. Small sponsorships arrived. Free products appeared at their apartment. A skincare company offered a partnership. A clothing boutique sent promotional packages. For the first time, Vanessa began earning real money from social media. The excitement transformed her. At first, the change seemed positive. She smiled more, talked more, dreamed bigger. Yosef enjoyed watching it happen. Success looked good on her. But as the months passed, subtle changes began appearing. The first signs were easy to miss. Vanessa started talking differently. She began using phrases she heard from other influencers: personal brand, market value, high-value networking, status alignment, audience positioning. At first, Yosef barely noticed. Then he noticed something else. She had stopped introducing him the same way. In the beginning, she would say, "This is Yosef, my fiancé." Later it became, "This is Yosef." Then eventually, "This is my boyfriend." Small change, tiny difference. But Yosef noticed, because Yosef noticed everything. He simply didn't react immediately. One Saturday afternoon, Vanessa invited him to a networking brunch at an upscale restaurant in downtown Cleveland. The event was organized by local creators and entrepreneurs. Yosef wasn't excited about attending. Crowds exhausted him. Self-promotion exhausted him even more. But Vanessa wanted him there, so he went. The restaurant overlooked the Cuyahoga River. Glass walls, expensive decor, valet parking. The kind of place where people spent more money on brunch than Yosef spent on groceries for a week. Most attendees appeared carefully constructed. Perfect clothes, perfect smiles, perfect social media photographs. Yosef immediately stood out. Not because he looked bad, because he looked normal. Dark jeans, plain navy button-down shirt, work boots, no designer labels, no luxury watch, no visible attempt to impress anyone. Vanessa introduced him to several people. The conversations followed a pattern. "What do you do?" "Building maintenance." A brief pause, then polite smiles. Then attention shifted elsewhere. Yosef didn't take offense. He understood human nature. People often valued titles more than character. One creator named Chelsea Grant spent 15 minutes describing her brand partnerships. She never asked a single question about Yosef. Another entrepreneur discussed startup funding. A real estate influencer talked about passive income strategies. Everyone seemed to be performing success rather than discussing life, Yosef quietly observed. Vanessa participated effortlessly. She fit into that environment, maybe too well. During lunch, he noticed something else. Whenever someone asked about her future plans, Vanessa's eyes brightened. Whenever someone asked about her relationship, her enthusiasm faded. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Yosef filed the observation away. Weeks later, Vanessa reached 50,000 followers. The milestone changed everything. New opportunities arrived, national brands, conference invitations, paid appearances, more travel, more attention, more validation, and less time together. Their conversations became shorter. Their schedules drifted apart. Some nights, Vanessa returned home after midnight. Some weekends disappeared entirely. Yosef remained supportive. He told himself growth required sacrifice. He told himself relationships went through seasons. He told himself patience mattered. Still, certain moments stayed with him. One evening, while fixing a loose cabinet hinge in their apartment kitchen, Yosef overheard Vanessa speaking on the phone in the next room. He wasn't trying to listen. The apartment simply wasn't large enough for privacy. The caller asked something Yosef couldn't hear. Vanessa laughed, then replied, "No, he's nice." A pause. "He's just..." Another pause. Yosef stopped working. "Different." Silence. Then laughter. More conversation. The subject changed. Yosef finished repairing the cabinet. He never mentioned it, but the word stayed with him. Different. Not dependable, not loyal, not kind. Different. Months continued passing. Vanessa's audience crossed 100,000 followers. Companies flew her to events. Hotels upgraded her rooms. Restaurants offered complimentary meals. She entered a world that rewarded appearance, image, and perception. A world Yosef never cared about. The distance between them slowly widened. Neither acknowledged it directly. Then one afternoon, Vanessa arrived home carrying an invitation. A physical invitation, heavy cardstock, gold lettering, exclusive, important. She placed it on the kitchen table. Yosef looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" Vanessa smiled. "A private creator dinner." "Sounds nice." "It is." She sat across from him. "There'll be investors there." Yosef nodded. "Congratulations. Influencers too." "That's great." Vanessa hesitated. Then she looked at him carefully, almost as if evaluating something. Yosef noticed. He always noticed. Finally, she asked, "You'll come with me, right?" Something about the question felt unusual. Not the words, the hesitation behind them. Yosef closed his laptop. "Of course," Vanessa smiled, but the smile didn't fully reach her eyes. And for reasons he couldn't explain, a quiet feeling settled in his chest. Not fear, not suspicion. Something smaller, something harder to define. The kind of feeling a man gets when he senses a storm long before seeing the clouds. The dinner was scheduled for the following Friday at the Shoreby Club. At the time, Yosef believed it would be another networking event, another evening of polite conversations, another chance to support the woman he loved. He had no idea it would become one of the most important nights of his life. Because before that evening ended, Yosef Ward would hear words that changed the way he viewed Vanessa forever. Friday arrived cold and clear. The wind coming off Lake Erie carried the last bite of winter through downtown Cleveland, rattling bare tree branches and pushing people quickly from their cars into warm buildings. At 6:30 that evening, Yosef Ward stood in front of a bathroom mirror inside the apartment he shared with Vanessa Brooks. He adjusted the collar of a navy button-down shirt. The shirt wasn't new, but it was clean, pressed, presentable. He looked at himself for a moment, then stepped away from the mirror. Yosef had never been a man obsessed with appearances. He believed clean clothes mattered, character mattered, reliability mattered. The rest felt secondary. Vanessa emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later. For a moment, Yosef simply stared. She looked stunning, black evening dress, simple jewelry, professional makeup. The confidence of someone becoming accustomed to attention. "You ready?" she asked. Yosef smiled. "Ready." They drove east toward the Shoreby Club in Bratenau. The invitation described the event as a private networking dinner for creators, investors, media executives, and startup founders. Exclusive, invitation only. The kind of event Vanessa had spent years trying to reach. As they approached the club, luxury vehicles filled the parking area. Mercedes, BMWs, Range Rovers, a Ferrari near the entrance. Yosef parked his aging Ford Ranger near the back corner of the lot, far away from the others, not because anyone told him to, because there was space available, nothing more. But he noticed Vanessa looking through the windshield, not at the building, at the vehicles, at the distance between their truck and everything else. A small detail, yet it stayed with him. Inside, the Shoreby Club looked exactly as wealthy people expected wealthy places to look. Dark wood, crystal lighting, polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, waiters carrying silver trays, soft piano music drifting through the room. Groups of people stood together holding wine glasses and exchanging business cards. Everyone appeared successful, or at least skilled at looking successful. Vanessa immediately relaxed. This environment energized her. She recognized faces. People recognized her. Several creators approached within minutes. Compliments, introductions, laughter, photographs. Yosef followed quietly beside her, a familiar pattern. At first things went smoothly. Vanessa introduced him to a venture capitalist from Chicago, a marketing consultant from New York, a creator management executive from Nashville. The conversations lasted only a few minutes each. The questions remained predictable. "So, what do you do?" "Building maintenance." The reaction never changed. The brief pause, the polite smile, the rapid shift toward another topic. Yosef wasn't offended. He had seen it too many times. People measured importance through titles. It saved them the effort of learning who someone actually was. Around 7:15, the dinner moved into the main ballroom. Guests took their seats. Yosef found himself placed near the end of a large table. Vanessa sat several seats away between two well-known creators. The arrangement didn't bother him until he noticed something. Nobody had made a mistake. Someone had deliberately arranged seating according to perceived value. Investors near the center, major creators nearby, executives close behind, everyone else toward the edges. Yosef sat near the corner, invisible again. A waiter poured water. Conversations continued. Across the table sat a startup founder named Blake Harmon. 32. Expensive suit. Expensive watch. Expensive confidence. The kind of man who announced success before anyone asked. Blake glanced at Yosef's name card. Yosef. That's me. What industry are you in? Facilities maintenance. Blake smiled. Not cruelly, worse, dismissively. Interesting. Yosef took a sip of water. Blake continued. You planning to stay in that? For now. For now. Another man joined the conversation. I thought maintenance jobs were disappearing because of automation. Several people laughed softly. Yosef didn't. Blake leaned back. So what's the long-term plan? Yosef considered the question, then answered honestly. Keep building. What are you building? The table looked toward him. For a second, Yosef thought about explaining. The software, the research, the systems he worked on after midnight, the thousands of hours. Then he changed his mind. No reason to talk about it yet. More smiles, more assumptions. One woman laughed lightly. Mysterious. The conversation moved on to investments, market trends, brand partnerships. The people at the table quickly forgot Yosef existed. He preferred that outcome. Over the next hour, he listened far more than he spoke. People revealed a surprising amount when they thought nobody important was listening, boasting, exaggerating, performing. The evening felt less like networking and more like theater. Everyone selling something, often themselves. By 9 o'clock, guests began moving around again. Groups formed throughout the club. Vanessa disappeared into one of them. Yosef didn't mind. He wandered toward a hallway near the terrace overlooking Lake Erie. The cool air outside felt refreshing. For the first time all evening, the noise faded. He stood alone for several minutes. Then he heard laughter. Familiar laughter. Vanessa's. The sound came from around a nearby corner. Yosef wasn't trying to eavesdrop. He simply recognized her voice. He turned toward the hallway, then stopped. 3 people stood nearby. Vanessa, Chelsea Grant, and Blake Harmon. None of them had noticed him. Chelsea laughed. So seriously, are you actually going to marry him? Vanessa rolled her eyes. The gesture landed like a small stone in Yosef's chest. Blake grinned. I've been wondering that all night. More laughter. Then came the answer. The answer Yosef would remember for years. Vanessa took a sip from her glass, shrugged, and said, Yosef isn't my future. The hallway suddenly felt colder. Chelsea raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Vanessa laughed again, a little louder this time. He's just a phase I haven't finished exiting yet. Silence. For a moment nobody responded. Then Blake chuckled. That's brutal. Vanessa smiled. You asked. Chelsea looked uncomfortable, not because of Yosef, because Vanessa had said the quiet part out loud. Blake wasn't uncomfortable at all. So what's the real plan? Vanessa looked toward the ballroom, toward the successful people, the investors, the executives, the creators. The real plan, she smiled. I'm not spending my life with a maintenance guy. The words landed cleanly. No anger, no hesitation, no uncertainty, just certainty, absolute certainty. Yosef stood motionless, not because he was shocked, because everything suddenly made sense. The conversations, the distance, the introductions, the embarrassment she had been trying to hide. The relationship hadn't changed recently. It had been changing for a long time. This was simply the first honest moment. Yosef quietly stepped back before anyone noticed him. Then he walked away. No confrontation, no dramatic scene, no argument, nothing. He returned to the ballroom, collected his jacket, waited. 40 minutes later, Vanessa found him near the entrance. You okay? Yeah. You've been quiet. Yosef almost smiled. Almost. Long week. She accepted the explanation immediately. On the drive home, neither said much. The city lights passed across the windshield. Traffic remained light. Vanessa checked messages on her phone. Yosef focused on the road. His expression never changed, but his mind had become very still, very clear. Sometimes a person spends years trying to understand where they stand. Then one sentence provides the answer. When they arrived home, Vanessa headed toward the bathroom. "I need to film something before bed." "Okay." The bathroom door closed. Minutes later, Yosef heard her recording content. Her voice sounded excited, energetic, inspired, as if the evening had given her new material. Yosef sat alone in the dark living room. The glow from the hallway stretched across the floor. Inside the bathroom, Vanessa continued speaking to her camera. Inside the living room, Yosef stared at nothing, and for the first time he began wondering whether the woman he loved was preparing to turn their relationship into content. A question that would soon receive an answer far worse than he imagined. The post appeared 3 days later. It went live at 8:17 p.m. on a Monday. Yosef remembered the exact time because he eventually saved every version of it. Every screenshot, every edit, every comment thread, every archived copy. At the time, however, it looked like just another social media update. He was sitting alone in the Hartwell Commerce Center break room when his phone vibrated. A notification, then another, then 3 more. Yosef frowned. That was unusual. He rarely received notifications from social media. He opened his phone. The first message came from an old friend. "Hey man, you okay?" The second was shorter. "Did she really post this?" The third included a link. No explanation, just a link. Yosef clicked it. The page loaded. At first he simply stared. Vanessa Brooks had posted a photograph of herself sitting inside a luxury hotel lobby. Designer handbag, coffee on the table, perfect lighting, perfect angle. The image itself wasn't unusual. The caption was. It began with a question. How many years should a woman waste waiting for a man to become somebody? Thousands of people had already reacted. Hundreds of comments were appearing every minute. Yosef kept reading. For too long I convinced myself that loyalty mattered more than ambition. I told myself potential was enough. I told myself hard work eventually leads somewhere. But eventually you have to accept reality. His eyes moved lower. Each sentence grew sharper, more specific. Some people are comfortable staying exactly where they are. Same job, same truck, same excuses. Year after year, Yosef felt something settle heavily inside his chest. Not anger, not yet, recognition, because everyone who knew them would understand exactly who she was describing. Vanessa never used his name. She didn't need to. The details identified him perfectly. The old Ford Ranger, the maintenance job, the night shifts, the years together, the engagement that never happened. Everything pointed toward one person, Yosef Ward. The post continued. A woman shouldn't have to lower her standards because a man refuses to raise his. Sometimes leaving isn't betrayal. Sometimes leaving is self-respect. Below the text sat a final sentence, the sentence that generated most of the attention. I finally stopped waiting for someone who was going nowhere in life. Yosef read it twice, then a third time. The break room remained silent. Only the humming vending machine filled the space around him. His phone vibrated continuously. New comments, new shares, new reactions. The numbers climbed rapidly. 10,000 views, 20,000, 30,000. Within an hour, the post had spread beyond Vanessa's audience. People loved stories that allowed them to judge strangers, especially when they only heard one side. Yosef locked his phone, finished his bottle of water, then returned to work. Not because he didn't care, because a broken air handling unit still needed repair. And because he had spent most of his life learning that emotional reactions rarely improved practical problems. By midnight, however, the situation had become impossible to ignore. The post was everywhere. Employees inside the building had seen it. Former classmates had seen it. Distant relatives had seen it. Even people who barely knew him had seen it. At 1:08 a.m., Yosef walked into the maintenance office. Derek Lawson sat inside drinking coffee. The grin appeared immediately. There it was, the look Yosef had anticipated, half amusement, half curiosity. "Hey, celebrity!" Yosef kept walking. Derek laughed. Come on, man. No response. I saw the post. Of course he did. Everyone had. Derek leaned back in his chair. That's rough. Yosef placed paperwork on the desk, still silent. Derek continued. I mean, damn. Another laugh. She didn't exactly hold back. The room grew quiet. For a second, Derek seemed disappointed that he wasn't getting a reaction. Most people would have argued, defended themselves, complained, exploded. Yosef simply signed a maintenance report, then left. The interaction lasted less than a minute. Yet it traveled through the building before sunrise. By the next evening, people were watching him differently, not openly, subtly, the same way people slow down when passing a traffic accident, curiosity disguised as concern. A few employees offered sympathy, others offered advice, several offered opinions nobody requested. Yosef accepted none of it. Instead, he did something that seemed strange to everyone else. He started collecting evidence. The moment his shift ended, he drove home, sat at his desk, opened his laptop, then began documenting everything. The original post, screenshots, URLs, timestamps, engagement numbers, comments, shares, reposts, every detail. Methodically, carefully, without emotion. At first glance, it looked obsessive. It wasn't. Yosef simply believed records mattered, especially when public narratives started replacing facts. The comments section grew uglier as the days passed. People filled in missing details, invented stories, made assumptions, created entire versions of Yosef they had never met. One user claimed he was unemployed. Another claimed Vanessa had financially supported him for years. A third claimed he was lazy. A fourth claimed he was abusive. None of it came from evidence. Yet thousands accepted it as truth. Because repetition often disguises itself as credibility. Yosef never responded, not once. Several friends encouraged him to defend himself. One even drafted a statement. Yosef deleted it. Another suggested exposing Vanessa publicly. Yosef declined. A third wanted him to post screenshots from their relationship, private conversations, financial records, proof. Again, Yosef refused. He wasn't protecting Vanessa. He was protecting himself, because he understood something many people didn't. The internet rewarded escalation. The moment he joined the fight, he would become part of the spectacle. And Yosef had no interest in becoming content. Meanwhile, Vanessa's audience exploded. 50,000 new followers arrived within weeks. Podcasts invited her on as a guest. Creators reposted her story. Influencers praised her courage. Brands noticed the engagement. Sponsors arrived. The post became one of the most successful pieces of content she had ever created. And every new success seemed tied to the same narrative. The woman who escaped the man going nowhere. Late one night, Yosef sat alone inside his apartment. The glow from multiple monitors illuminated the room. The post remained open on one screen. Comments continued pouring in. Thousands now, tens of thousands. He read them without expression. Then he opened a blank document. For the first time, he decided to write a response. Not public, private, just for himself. His fingers moved across the keyboard. Paragraph after paragraph appeared. Facts, dates, context, truth. He explained everything. The years together, the support, the sacrifices, the details nobody knew. For nearly an hour, he wrote. When finished, the document stretched across multiple pages. Yosef read it once, twice, then sat quietly. The apartment felt still. Outside rain tapped against the windows. Inside, only the soft hum of computer fans broke the silence. Finally, Yosef highlighted the entire document. Every word, every sentence, every explanation. Then he pressed delete. The screen became blank again. He leaned back in his chair, because deep down he already understood something important. People who wanted the truth would eventually find it. People who wanted entertainment never cared about the truth in the first place, and arguing with the second group was a waste of life. He closed the file, opened another folder instead. A folder containing software architecture plans, security frameworks, detection systems, ideas he had been building for years. His attention shifted, away from Vanessa, away from the post, away from the humiliation, toward something else, toward the future. The post would remain online, the internet would keep talking, Vanessa would keep benefiting from the story. Yosef knew all of that. What he didn't know was that the post had already created a chain of events far larger than either of them could see. Because less than 2 weeks later, Vanessa would leave for good. And when she did, Yosef would discover that the viral post was only the beginning of what she had taken from him. Vanessa moved out 11 days after the post went viral. Not 10, not 12. Yosef remembered the exact number because he wrote it down. By then, documenting things had become a habit. The morning began quietly. No argument, no dramatic confrontation, no final attempt to save the relationship. Yosef returned home after another overnight shift at the Hartwell Commerce Center and immediately noticed the difference. The apartment sounded different, emptier. A strange stillness hung in the air. He stepped inside. The living room told the story before Vanessa did. Several shelves were empty. Decorations were gone. A floor lamp had disappeared. 2 framed photographs no longer sat above the television. Cardboard boxes lined the hallway. Vanessa emerged from the bedroom carrying another one. For a moment, neither spoke. The relationship had reached a point where words no longer changed outcomes. Finally, she broke the silence. "I signed a lease." Yosef nodded. "Okay." The answer seemed to surprise her. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she expected begging. Maybe she expected a fight. Instead, she received calm acceptance. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "It's in Ohio City." Another nod. "Okay." The silence returned. Yosef set down his lunchbox, removed his jacket, walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. The simple actions almost felt absurd. A relationship ending should have looked more dramatic. Yet life rarely followed movie scripts. Most endings arrived quietly, one ordinary decision at a time. After a minute, Vanessa spoke again. "That's all you're going to say?" Yosef looked up. "What would you like me to say?" The question hung between them. Vanessa didn't answer, because neither of them truly needed a conversation. The decisions had already been made, not that morning, months earlier, perhaps years earlier. The moving process continued throughout the day. Yosef stayed out of the way. He slept for several hours, woke up, made coffee, reviewed technical notes. Occasionally, he heard furniture being carried downstairs. By evening, most of Vanessa's belongings were gone. Before leaving, she placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. "What is it?" Yosef asked. "Information about closing the joint account." Yosef looked at it, then looked back at her. "Okay?" Vanessa waited, perhaps for a reaction, perhaps for regret, perhaps for something that would justify the story she had already told the world. Nothing came. Finally, she picked up her purse, opened the apartment door, and walked out. The relationship ended with the sound of a closing latch. Nothing more. Yosef stood alone in the kitchen. The apartment felt larger, colder, almost unfamiliar. He stared at the closed door for several seconds, then returned to making coffee, because there was nothing else to do. At least, that was what he believed. 3 days later, he discovered the first problem. It happened while reviewing monthly expenses. Another habit. Yosef tracked everything, always had. He opened the joint account records to finalize paperwork, then stopped. A series of transactions caught his attention, several large withdrawals, multiple electronic transfers, unexpected purchases. The dates stretched back months. Yosef frowned. At first he assumed there was a mistake. Then he examined the records more carefully. The numbers told a different story. Over nearly a year, thousands of dollars had quietly disappeared from the account. Not enough to attract immediate attention, just enough to accumulate. A few hundred here, a few hundred there, then larger amounts, travel expenses, luxury purchases, subscription services, unknown transfers. The total exceeded $28,000. Yosef stared at the screen. The amount itself mattered less than the pattern. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, systematic, careful. His expression remained unchanged, but his attention sharpened. That was always the first sign. When Yosef became serious, he grew quieter, not louder. He printed the records, organized them by date, highlighted questionable transactions, then started another folder, the same way he had documented the post. Evidence first, emotion later, if emotion arrived at all. The following week introduced another surprise. A credit card application appeared in the mail. Yosef had never submitted it, nor had he authorized it. A second document arrived 2 days later, then a third. Small inconsistencies, small irregularities, but together they formed a pattern Yosef no longer felt comfortable ignoring. Most people would have called friends, complained online, confronted their ex. Yosef did none of those things. Instead, he scheduled a consultation. That decision led him to Rachel Harper. Rachel's office occupied the 8th floor of a downtown Cleveland law building. Nothing flashy. No oversized reception area. No dramatic city views. Just organized efficiency. Rachel herself reflected the same philosophy. 52 years old, sharp eyes, minimal patience for nonsense. The kind of attorney who cared more about documentation than speeches. Yosef arrived carrying a thick folder. Rachel glanced at it, then at him. Most people bring emotions. Yosef placed the folder on her desk. I brought records. A faint smile appeared, for the first time all day. Good. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Rachel reviewed financial statements, transaction histories, screenshots, timelines, notes. When she finished, she closed the folder. You documented all of this yourself. Yes. Rachel leaned back. That's unusual. Yosef waited. Most people remember feelings. She tapped the paperwork. You remembered facts. Silence followed. Then Rachel said something Yosef would remember for years. Anger is temporary, she pointed at the evidence. This lasts. Yosef looked down at the documents. Rachel continued. People think justice comes from outrage. She shook her head. It comes from records. The sentence settled into his mind immediately. Because it aligned with everything he already believed. Truth mattered. Evidence mattered. Facts mattered. The rest was noise. Rachel agreed to represent him regarding the financial issues. Nothing aggressive, nothing dramatic. Just a methodical review of what had happened. As the meeting ended, Rachel walked him toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Yosef turned. The social media post. Rachel's voice remained neutral. I've seen situations like this before. Yosef waited. Don't fight a public narrative emotionally. She looked directly at him. Build something stronger than it. The advice sounded simple, yet it lingered with him throughout the drive home. That evening, Yosef returned to his apartment. The second bedroom remained untouched, the room nobody else ever entered. The room Vanessa had never taken seriously. To her it was where Yosef wasted time. To Yosef it was where his future lived. He sat at his workstation, powered on multiple monitors, opened folders filled with code, research, prototype designs, security models, years of work. Years nobody saw, years nobody valued. A project directory sat near the top of the screen, one folder among hundreds. Its name was simple, Loop Shield. Yosef clicked it. Lines of code appeared, detection algorithms, moderation systems, behavioral analysis tools. The project had started as an idea years earlier, a way to identify coordinated harassment campaigns online, fake engagement, manipulated narratives, artificial amplification. At the time, it had been little more than an experiment. Now, staring at the screen, Yosef saw something different. Possibility. The internet had just taught him a lesson. False narratives moved faster than truth. Platforms rewarded outrage. Algorithms rewarded conflict. Maybe there was a better way. Maybe there was a system capable of detecting manipulation before it spread. The apartment remained silent. Outside, Cleveland traffic moved beneath streetlights. Inside, Yosef opened a notebook. Then another. He reviewed architecture plans, made corrections, added ideas, connected concepts. Hours passed unnoticed. The pain of the breakup never disappeared, neither did the humiliation, but something else had begun replacing it. Focus, direction, purpose, the kind that arrives when a person finally stops looking backward. Near midnight, Yosef created a new development timeline. New milestones, new objectives, a completely revised roadmap. Then he saved the document, sat back, and stared at the screen. For the first time since Vanessa's post went viral, his attention wasn't on what had been taken from him. It was on what he intended to build. What Yosef couldn't know that night was that the project sitting on his monitor would eventually change his entire life. But before that happened, he would need help. Because no matter how talented someone is, some roads are too large to travel alone. And within a few months, a chance encounter with a cybersecurity consultant named Alicia Patel would change everything. For nearly 6 months after Vanessa left, Yosef Ward lived the same way he always had. He worked nights. He slept during the day. He paid his bills. He ignored social media. And every spare hour went into Loop Shield. The routine was exhausting, but Yosef preferred exhaustion over regret. Most evenings began at the Hartwell Commerce Center. Most mornings ended inside the second bedroom of his apartment. The room had gradually transformed into something between a laboratory and a war room. Whiteboards covered entire walls. Handwritten notes filled dozens of notebooks. System diagrams stretched across corkboards. Several monitors displayed lines of code, data sets, behavior maps, traffic simulations. No investors had funded the project. No company supported it. No team existed. Only Yosef, and thousands of hours. The goal remained simple. Build software capable of identifying coordinated manipulation on social platforms, fake engagement, bot networks, harassment campaigns, artificial amplification, the very mechanisms that allowed online lies to spread faster than truth. At first, the project felt personal, an attempt to understand what had happened to him. Over time, it became something larger. Yosef discovered that the same systems responsible for his public humiliation affected millions of people every day. Businesses, students, teachers, private citizens. The problem wasn't unique, the scale was. One evening around midnight, Yosef tested a new detection model. Thousands of simulated accounts moved across the screen. The software monitored patterns, connections, behavior, timing. After several minutes, the system highlighted suspicious clusters automatically. Yosef leaned forward. Interesting. Very interesting. The algorithm had identified coordinated activity faster than expected, much faster. He reviewed the results twice, then 3 times. The data remained consistent. For the first time, he felt something rare. Excitement, real excitement. The project was working. Not perfectly, not yet, but it was working. Unfortunately, progress created a different problem. Money. Servers cost money. Software licenses cost money. Data storage cost money. Every improvement increased expenses. Yosef funded everything himself. The maintenance job paid enough to survive, not enough to scale technology. Several times he considered seeking investors. Each time he rejected the idea. Not because he feared rejection, because the project wasn't ready. He needed proof first. Evidence, always evidence. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, an unexpected opportunity arrived. The opportunity appeared disguised as a broken network cabinet. The incident occurred inside the Hartwell Commerce Center. A cybersecurity consulting company had rented temporary office space on the 9th floor while supporting a regional financial institution. A network failure interrupted their work. Management called maintenance. Maintenance called Yosef. By the time he arrived, several frustrated professionals stood around an open equipment rack. Laptops covered nearby tables. Cables stretched across the floor. Deadlines were approaching. Nobody looked happy. A woman in a dark blazer crouched beside the cabinet, focused, calm, analyzing the problem. Yosef immediately noticed something different about her. While everyone else looked stressed, she looked curious, as if the failure represented a puzzle rather than a disaster. She glanced up when he entered. "You maintenance?" "Yes." "Good." She pointed toward the rack. "We've got a wiring issue somewhere." Yosef examined the equipment. 5 minutes later, he located the problem. A damaged fiber connection hidden behind several cable bundles. Simple, easy to miss, easy to fix. 20 minutes later, the network returned. The room relaxed instantly. The woman stood, extended her hand. Alicia Patel. "Yosef Ward. Nice work." "Thank you." Most conversations ended there. This one didn't, because while packing his tools, Yosef noticed something on a nearby monitor. A threat detection dashboard, behavior analytics, pattern recognition. The subject interested him. More importantly, he understood it. Without thinking, he asked a question. "Your anomaly thresholds are dynamic." Alicia blinked, then looked at him more carefully. "Excuse me, The detection model, Yosef pointed toward the screen. It adjusts based on network behavior. Silence. Alicia stared. The room suddenly felt different. Because maintenance technicians weren't supposed to ask questions like that. They certainly weren't supposed to understand the dashboard. Finally, Alicia nodded. Yes. Yosef studied the screen briefly. Interesting approach. Alicia folded her arms. What makes you say that? For the next 10 minutes, they discussed cybersecurity, detection models, network behavior, data analysis, machine learning. By the end of the conversation, Alicia had completely forgotten Yosef repaired elevators for a living. She cared about something else, the way he thought. When Yosef eventually left, Alicia remained standing beside the equipment rack, watching him walk away. 3 days later, she emailed him. The message was simple: coffee. Yosef almost declined, then accepted. The meeting took place at a small coffee shop near Ohio City. Neither treated it like networking. Neither treated it like recruitment. It felt more like two people discussing problems they genuinely cared about solving. Alicia learned about Loop Shield. Yosef learned about her consulting work. Hours disappeared. Ideas flowed naturally. By the end of the meeting, Alicia leaned back and shook her head. I still don't understand something. Yosef waited. You built all of this yourself. Most of it. While working maintenance nights. Yes. Alicia laughed softly. Not mockingly, in disbelief. That's insane. Maybe it was. But Yosef never considered it extraordinary, just necessary. Over the following months, they met regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes online, sometimes inside Yosef's apartment office. Alicia became the first person outside Yosef's private world to truly understand the project. More importantly, she understood its potential. One evening, she reviewed a demonstration of the latest detection system. Fake engagement networks appeared on screen. The software identified suspicious activity, mapped connections, tracked manipulation patterns. The results spoke for themselves. When the demonstration ended, Alicia remained silent for several seconds. Then she said, You know this is bigger than moderation software. Yosef looked up. What do you mean? This could change how platforms identify abuse. She pointed toward the monitor. You're not solving one problem. Another pause. You're solving several. Yosef had considered that possibility. He simply avoided thinking about it too much. Hope could become a distraction. Alicia wasn't interested in caution. She was interested in reality, and reality looked promising. A few weeks later, she arrived at Yosef's apartment carrying legal documents. Yosef frowned. What are those? Alicia placed them on the desk. A company. He stared. She smiled. A real one. The paperwork outlined formation documents, operating agreements, ownership structures, business registrations, everything necessary to create a formal organization. Yosef reviewed the pages, then looked back at her. You already filled these out. Mostly. Why? Alicia laughed. Because eventually somebody is going to buy this technology. She pointed at the software. And I'd rather they buy it from a company. Silence filled the room. Outside rain tapped against the apartment windows. Inside, Yosef looked at the documents. A year earlier, his future had seemed simple. Maintenance work. An engagement, a predictable life. Now he sat inside a room full of servers discussing company formation. Life moved strangely, especially when nobody was paying attention. Finally, Yosef picked up a pen, signed the documents, then handed them back. Alicia grinned. There it is. What? The first step. Together they officially formed Ward Analytics, a small company nobody had heard of. No office, no employees, no investors, no publicity, just two people and an idea. The world continued overlooking Yosef Ward. The viral post remained online. People still believed the same story. The maintenance worker, the man going nowhere. Meanwhile, inside a small apartment in Lakewood, something quietly began growing. Something powerful, something valuable. And only a few months later, an email from a major technology conference would prove that the world was finally starting to notice. The first real check arrived on a Thursday morning. Not an investment, not venture capital, not one of those dramatic moments startup founders like to post about online. It was something far less exciting, and far more important. A paying customer. Yosef Ward was drinking coffee in his apartment kitchen when Alicia Patel called. The excitement in her voice appeared immediately. "We got it." Yosef set down his mug. "Got what?" "The contract." Silence. "Then, which one?" Alicia laughed. "The bank." Now Yosef stood completely still. 3 months earlier, Ward Analytics had submitted a proposal to a regional financial institution headquartered in Pittsburgh. The bank had experienced problems with coordinated fraud attempts, fake account activity, artificial engagement networks targeting customer support systems, organized digital manipulation. Ward Analytics proposed a solution, a small pilot program, nothing enormous, but large enough to matter, large enough to prove whether the technology worked outside controlled testing environments. The proposal had disappeared into corporate bureaucracy. Weeks passed, then months. Neither Yosef nor Alicia expected much. Now the answer had arrived. "We won the contract," Alicia repeated. Yosef looked out the apartment window. The street below remained unchanged. Cars passed. People walked dogs. Life continued normally. Yet something fundamental had shifted. A real organization had trusted their technology, not because of marketing, not because of connections, because the product solved a problem. "When do we start?" Yosef asked. Alicia smiled. "Monday." That first contract wasn't life-changing. The total value sat slightly under $80,000. After expenses, taxes, infrastructure costs, and operational requirements, the amount looked even smaller. But money wasn't the point. Validation was. For years, Yosef had been building in silence. Now the market had answered. The work mattered. The following months became a blur of activity. Days disappeared. Weeks vanished. Yosef worked maintenance nights, Ward Analytics during the day. Sleep became optional. Coffee became essential. The Pittsburgh project moved quickly. Their software identified suspicious account clusters, detected coordinated behavior, flagged manipulation patterns. The results exceeded expectations. Bank executives noticed. Additional departments became interested. More meetings followed, more testing, more opportunities. For the first time, Ward Analytics possessed something valuable, a track record. People trusted evidence, and evidence was accumulating rapidly. One afternoon, several executives gathered inside a conference room overlooking downtown Pittsburgh. Large screens displayed performance reports, graphs, metrics, incident reductions, operational improvements. The numbers spoke clearly. A senior executive reviewed the reports, then looked toward Yosef. "You built this?" Yosef nodded. "Yes." The executive glanced at Alicia, then back at Yosef. "You were doing building maintenance 18 months ago." "Still am." The executive blinked. Apparently that answer wasn't expected. Alicia smiled into her coffee cup. She had witnessed that reaction before, many times. People struggled to reconcile their assumptions with reality. Yosef never helped them. He simply answered questions honestly. Eventually the truth handled the rest. The Pittsburgh contract led to another opportunity, then another. Word spread slowly, not publicly, professionally, the best kind. A school district outside Columbus contacted Ward Analytics after dealing with organized harassment campaigns targeting students and faculty. Unlike banks, schools operated under different pressures, different vulnerabilities, different risks. Yet the core problem remained familiar. Coordinated online behavior, digital abuse, manipulated narratives. The software adapted surprisingly well. Within months, the district reported measurable improvements. Threat identification accelerated, false reports decreased, response times improved, administrators took notice. Soon other districts started asking questions. For the first time, Yosef faced a problem he had never anticipated. Growth, real growth. The company needed infrastructure, servers, employees, legal support, accounting systems. Everything became more complicated and more expensive. One evening, Alicia spread financial reports across a conference table inside a rented office suite. The office wasn't impressive. Just 2 rooms inside a commercial building near downtown Cleveland. Still, it represented progress. A year earlier, Ward Analytics had existed inside Yosef's apartment. Now they had an address. Alicia pointed toward the reports. "We need to hire." Yosef studied the numbers. We can wait. No, she tapped the documents. We can't. He already knew she was right. Growth had a strange way of punishing hesitation. Success created obligations. Customers expected support. Systems required maintenance. Projects demanded attention. Eventually, one person became insufficient, then two. By the end of that year, Ward Analytics employed 6 people, small, focused, highly capable. Yosef remained deeply involved in every technical decision, every product update, every architecture review. The company reflected his personality, quiet, methodical, evidence-driven. Meanwhile, something else happened. The maintenance job finally became unnecessary. Financially speaking, Yosef no longer needed it. Ward Analytics generated more income than he had ever imagined possible. Friends expected immediate changes, a luxury vehicle, a larger apartment, expensive watches, some visible sign of success. None appeared. Yosef continued driving the same Ford Ranger. He still packed lunch, still bought coffee from ordinary places, still lived below his means. The only noticeable difference involved priorities. He paid off debts, built reserves, invested in infrastructure, expanded the company carefully. The outside world saw little change. The foundation beneath the surface changed completely. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Alicia walked into Yosef's office carrying a tablet. "You should see this." Yosef looked up. "What is it?" Instead of answering, she placed the tablet on his desk. The screen displayed a video advertisement. A familiar face appeared. Vanessa Brooks. Years had passed. Her audience had exploded. Her brand had grown. Professional lighting, luxury travel, corporate sponsorships. Everything looked polished. Everything looked successful. Yosef watched silently. The advertisement promoted a speaking event, a creator conference in Miami. The theme focused on personal growth, overcoming bad relationships, building standards, moving forward. Then the footage changed. A screenshot appeared briefly. Only a few seconds, but Yosef recognized it immediately. The post, that post, the same viral publication from years earlier, the one describing him as a man going nowhere in life. Vanessa had incorporated it into her personal brand, a cornerstone story, a defining chapter, something she referenced repeatedly. The audience loved it, sponsors loved it, conference organizers loved it. Apparently, humiliation had become marketable. The video ended. Silence settled inside the office. Alicia studied Yosef carefully. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yes." The answer was truthful. The old pain no longer felt sharp. Time had worn down its edges. Still, something about the situation bothered him. Not emotionally, factually. The story continued generating value, money, attention, influence, all built upon a narrative that remained incomplete. Yosef didn't mention the thought. Instead, he returned the tablet. Alicia sighed. "I was afraid that would upset you." "It doesn't." "You sure?" "Yes." And he was, mostly, because something interesting had happened over the years. The farther Yosef moved toward his future, the less power the past seemed to possess. Yet the past wasn't finished with him, not even close. That evening, after everyone left the office, Yosef reviewed company reports alone. Growth projections, customer metrics, partnership opportunities. The future looked promising. Then, an email arrived. The sender's name immediately caught his attention. Spotlight Loop, the social media platform where Vanessa's post still existed, the platform that had amplified it, the platform that continued profiting from it. Yosef opened the message, read it once, then again. Alicia had been right. The world was finally noticing Ward Analytics, because Spotlight Loop wanted a meeting, and they weren't the only ones. The platform was beginning to experience serious problems Yosef's technology might be able to solve. He stared at the email for a long moment, then slowly leaned back in his chair. Outside, Cleveland traffic moved beneath the evening sky. Inside, an opportunity had just appeared. A very large opportunity. One that would eventually place Yosef Ward much closer to Spotlight Loop than anyone could possibly imagine, including Vanessa Brooks. The first signs appeared long before the public noticed. Inside, Spotlight Loop warning lights had been flashing for years, Most users never saw them. Advertisers did. Investors did. Executives certainly did. The platform still looked healthy from the outside. Millions of active accounts, billions of monthly interactions, influencers posting glamorous lifestyles, brands pouring money into campaigns. Everything appeared stable. Yet beneath the surface, the foundation had started cracking. And cracks always spread. The email invitation from Spotlight Loop led to a virtual meeting 2 weeks later. Yosef joined from the Ward Analytics office in Cleveland. Alicia sat beside him. 3 executives appeared on the screen. One of them introduced himself as Trevor Miles, Chief Operations Officer, 40 years old, sharp suit, carefully controlled voice, the kind of executive who measured every word. After brief introductions, Trevor got straight to the point. "We've reviewed your technology." Yosef nodded. Trevor continued. "The results are impressive." Another executive spoke. "We're particularly interested in your coordinated behavior detection." Alicia exchanged a quick glance with Yosef. That wasn't surprising. The feature had become Ward Analytics' strongest product. Trevor leaned forward. "Our platform faces increasing challenges." The statement sounded diplomatic. The reality was worse. Even Yosef knew that. Public reports had started appearing. Advertisers questioned engagement quality. Researchers raised concerns about bot activity. Content creators complained about manipulated metrics. The problems continued growing. Trevor continued. "We'd like to explore a partnership." The conversation lasted nearly 90 minutes. When it ended, no deal existed. But the message was clear. Spotlight Loop needed help. Significant help. As the screen went dark, Alicia folded her arms. "They're in trouble." Yosef nodded. "Yes, more than they're admitting?" "Probably." Neither said anything for several seconds, because the same conclusion had already formed in both minds. A company doesn't seek outside solutions unless internal solutions have failed. Something serious was happening. Over the following months, Ward Analytics entered several limited consulting agreements with organizations connected to social media platforms. Not full partnerships, not acquisitions, just contracts. Enough to provide insight, enough to reveal patterns. The deeper Yosef looked, the clearer the picture became. The industry had built enormous businesses around attention. Not truth, not accuracy, attention. And attention rewarded extreme behavior, outrage, conflict, humiliation. The exact forces that once turned Vanessa's post into a viral sensation. One afternoon, Alicia walked into Yosef's office carrying a stack of reports. Without speaking, she dropped them onto his desk. Yosef looked up. "What am I looking at? Industry research." He opened the first report, then the second, then the third. The findings were remarkably consistent. User trust was declining. Advertiser confidence was weakening. Content manipulation was increasing. Several platforms faced legal challenges, including Spotlight Loop. Yosef turned another page. A familiar logo appeared. Spotlight Loop. Projected losses, litigation risks, creator disputes, revenue concerns. The numbers were worse than expected. Much worse. The company remained profitable. But profitability wasn't the issue. Confidence was. Markets tolerated problems. They rarely tolerated uncertainty. Weeks later, another meeting occurred, this time not with Spotlight Loop, with an investment group. The invitation came through a mutual contact. Normally, Yosef ignored such requests. This one felt different. The meeting took place inside a private conference room in Chicago. Representatives from several investment firms attended. Most discussions focused on technology, security, growth opportunities, industry forecasts. Near the end, one investor asked an unexpected question. If a major platform became available, the man paused. Would you be interested? Yosef studied him carefully. Available how? The investor smiled slightly. Acquisition. The room grew quiet. Nobody mentioned Spotlight Loop directly. Nobody needed to. The implication hovered over the table. Alicia noticed it immediately. So did Yosef. Yet he answered carefully. That would depend on the platform. The investor nodded. Reasonable response. Professional response. The meeting ended shortly afterward. During the flight back to Cleveland, Alicia stared out the window, then finally spoke. They weren't asking hypothetically. No. You know which platform they meant. Yosef looked toward the clouds. Probably. Alicia laughed softly. That's insane. Maybe it was. A few years earlier, Yosef couldn't afford a new transmission for his truck. Now investors were discussing social media acquisitions. Life moved strangely. The following year accelerated everything. Ward Analytics continued growing. New clients arrived. Additional contracts followed. Revenue increased dramatically. More importantly, credibility increased. Organizations trusted the company. Trust created opportunity. Opportunity created leverage. And leverage attracted attention from people with money. One of those people was Nathan Cole. Nathan rarely appeared in technology headlines. That was intentional. He specialized in acquisitions, corporate restructuring, strategic investments, the kind of work that happened quietly, the kind Yosef respected. Their first meeting lasted 3 hours. The second lasted 5. By the third, they were discussing long-term possibilities. Nathan spoke differently than most investors. Less excitement, more analysis, less vision, more execution. One afternoon, while reviewing market data, Nathan pointed toward a report. Look here. Yosef studied the document. Spotlight loop again. Nathan tapped the page. The platform still has value. Yes. The problem is leadership. Another tap. And debt. Another. And lawsuits. Another. And advertiser confidence. Yosef remained silent. Nathan leaned back. The business isn't dead. No. It just needs different management. The statement sounded simple, but it carried enormous implications. Months passed. The discussions continued. Structures emerged. Possibilities expanded. Eventually, Nathan introduced a holding company. North Star Digital Holdings. The name meant nothing publicly. That was the point. Holding companies existed to operate quietly, to acquire, to restructure, to build. As plans developed, Yosef made a deliberate decision. His name would remain invisible. At least initially. Nathan would become the public face, the executive, the visible leader. Yosef preferred it that way. He always had. Attention created distractions. Control created results. The arrangement suited both men perfectly. One evening, long after most employees left the office, Yosef sat alone, reviewing acquisition projections. Financial models stretched across multiple screens, debt obligations, operational forecasts, legal exposures. The numbers were enormous, far larger than anything he had dealt with before. Alicia entered carrying coffee. She looked at the screens, then at him. Still thinking about it. Yes. She sat down. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Alicia broke the silence. You know what the strange part is? Yosef looked up. What? She smiled. The post. Immediately he understood. Vanessa, spotlight loop, the connection. Alicia shook her head. Out of every platform in the industry, another smile. It had to be that one. Yosef stared at the projections. The irony wasn't lost on him. Years earlier, spotlight loop amplified a narrative that painted him as a man going nowhere. Now circumstances were moving him directly toward ownership discussions involving the same company. Life possessed a strange sense of humor. Still, Yosef wasn't thinking about revenge. Not really. He was thinking about systems, platforms, technology, opportunity, business. The post belonged to the past. Or so he believed. A few weeks later, a confidential package arrived from North Star's legal team. Inside were preliminary acquisition documents, non-disclosure agreements, financial summaries, strategic outlines. Near the top sat a single page, a simple heading, Confidential Target Review. Below it appeared the company name, Spotlight Loop. Yosef stared at it for several seconds, then opened the file. Outside his office window, Cleveland traffic moved beneath the evening sky. Inside, he began reading. What he discovered in those documents would change everything. Because for the first time, Yosef wasn't looking at Spotlight Loop as a user, or as a victim, or even as a technology partner. He was looking at it as a potential owner, and hidden deep inside the platform's internal records waited something neither he nor Vanessa expected. The old post, still active, still generating engagement, still earning money, and still connected to far more than a simple breakup story. The first time Yosef Ward reviewed Spotlight Loop's internal records, he did it alone. No lawyers, no executives, no advisors. Just Yosef, a secure conference room, and several thousand pages of due diligence material. Outside downtown Cleveland, moved through another ordinary afternoon. Inside, nothing felt ordinary. The acquisition process had advanced faster than anyone expected. North Star Digital Holdings now possessed access to confidential operational data. Not ownership, not yet, but enough visibility to understand what truly existed beneath the platform's public image. And what Yosef found wasn't encouraging. User growth had slowed, advertiser retention had weakened, creator disputes increased every quarter, legal exposure appeared everywhere, the company remained valuable, yet it also carried hidden damage. The kind of damage public relations departments spent enormous amounts of money trying to conceal. Hours passed as Yosef reviewed reports, financial summaries, operational audits, compliance reviews, risk assessments. The work felt familiar. Evidence, patterns, facts. The same process he had used his entire life. Then something unexpected appeared. A section labeled High Engagement Legacy Content Assets. Yosef paused. The wording felt unusual. Curious, he opened the report. The document tracked older content that continued generating traffic years after publication. Posts, videos, creator campaigns, archived discussions. Anything that still attracted user attention. The platform treated those assets as revenue-generating properties. Each entry included engagement statistics, advertising performance, monetization metrics, traffic sources. Yosef scrolled through page after page. Most entries meant nothing to him. Then he froze. A familiar thumbnail appeared, a familiar profile photograph, a familiar name, Vanessa Brooks. For several seconds, Yosef simply stared. The room remained silent. The only sound came from the air conditioning system above him. Slowly he opened the file. There it was, the post, the same photograph, the same headline, the same story, the same accusation, the post that claimed he was going nowhere in life. Years had passed, yet it remained active, more than active, valuable. The engagement statistics filled multiple pages, views, shares, comments, advertising revenue, creator monetization, recommendation traffic. Yosef studied the numbers carefully, then studied them again. Because something felt wrong, very wrong. The post hadn't simply gone viral years ago. It continued receiving algorithmic promotion long afterward. Thousands of new impressions every month, consistent traffic, consistent revenue, consistent engagement. A single question formed immediately. Why the platform contained billions of posts? Why was this one still receiving visibility? Yosef opened additional reports, then more. Patterns began emerging. The post had repeatedly appeared inside recommendation systems, trending relationship discussions, personal growth content, creator success stories, breakup narratives, again and again, year after year. The platform kept feeding it to new audiences. Each appearance generated more revenue, more attention, more engagement, more profit. Yosef leaned back. His expression remained calm, yet his focus intensified. The post had always felt personal. Now it looked institutional. The platform itself had benefited, not merely Vanessa. Spotlight Loop had earned money from the story too, a lot of money. By evening, Yosef requested additional files, internal moderation records, policy reviews, compliance reports. He wanted context. The response arrived 2 days later. The new records revealed something even more interesting. The post had been reported multiple times. Not once, not twice, dozens. Users flagged it for harassment, targeted abuse, privacy concerns, potential policy violations. Every report generated an internal review. Every review reached the same outcome. No action taken. The explanations varied. Insufficient evidence, public interest, creator exception review, policy interpretation, different wording, same result. The post stayed online. Yosef opened another file, then another. The deeper he looked, the stranger the situation became. Certain creators appeared to receive treatment unavailable to ordinary users. Rules existed, yet enforcement varied. Some accounts lost visibility immediately, Others received warnings. Others seemed protected. Vanessa's account consistently belonged to the protected category, not officially. Unofficially, the distinction mattered, because unofficial decisions often left traces, and traces interested Yosef. 3 weeks later, another acquisition review meeting took place. Nathan Cole sat across the table. Several attorneys joined remotely. Financial advisors participated through video conference. Most discussion focused on debt obligations, revenue forecasts, risk mitigation. Then Yosef raised a question. Legacy creator protections. The room became quiet. Nathan looked up. What about them? Yosef slid several documents across the table. Nathan reviewed them. His expression changed slightly, only slightly, but Yosef noticed. Nathan always noticed details, which meant he recognized the significance immediately. One attorney adjusted her glasses. Where did these come from? Internal review materials. Silence followed. The attorney continued reading, then frowned. This is problematic. Nathan nodded slowly. Very. The conversation shifted, not toward Vanessa, toward policy, governance, liability. The bigger issue wasn't one creator. The bigger issue involved selective enforcement, because selective enforcement created exposure. Exposure created lawsuits, lawsuits created costs, and costs affected acquisitions. The business implications suddenly became significant. After the meeting ended, Nathan remained behind. He closed the conference room door, then sat across from Yosef. You know her. The statement wasn't a question. Yosef nodded. Yes. Nathan glanced toward the documents. The creator. Yes. Another pause. Nathan studied him carefully. Most people would have looked for anger, resentment, revenge. Nathan found none, only concentration. Finally, he spoke. Are you going to make this personal? Yosef answered immediately. No. Nathan watched him for several seconds, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Because he understood something important. Personal revenge created bad business decisions. Evidence created good ones. And Yosef had spent years choosing evidence. The following month brought another discovery, a significant one. Internal revenue reports connected directly to creator monetization. Yosef reviewed the figures late one evening. The office sat nearly empty. Most employees had gone home. Only a few lights remained on. As he moved through the data, a familiar account appeared. Vanessa Brooks. Additional metrics loaded. Historical revenue, performance incentives, traffic bonuses, sponsored content integration. The numbers surprised him. Not because they were enormous, because they existed at all. The post itself had generated measurable income, not just attention, money. The narrative had become a business asset, a profitable one. Yosef stared at the report. Years earlier, he lost a relationship. His reputation suffered publicly. People mocked him. Assumptions spread. The platform amplified everything. Now he was looking at the accounting records proving somebody got paid, not directly for harming him, indirectly through engagement, which might be even worse. He printed the report, added it to a growing folder. Another piece of evidence, another fact, another puzzle piece. The folder continued expanding. More documents arrived, more records surfaced, more questions emerged. Every answer seemed to reveal 3 additional questions. One evening, Alicia entered his office carrying takeout containers. She found Yosef surrounded by paperwork. Again. You've been here all day. Most of it. She set the food down, then noticed the documents. The post. Yosef nodded. Alicia sat across from him. What have you found? He handed her several pages. She reviewed them quietly. The silence lasted longer than usual. Finally, she looked up. That's not good. No. It goes deeper than I thought. Yes. Alicia closed the file. Then asked a question Yosef had been asking himself for weeks. If this is what we've already found, she paused. What haven't we found yet? The room fell silent. Outside the office windows, Cleveland glowed beneath thousands of lights. Inside, Yosef looked toward the growing stack of documents. Because Alicia was right. The evidence already looked troubling, yet instinct told him something larger remained hidden, something buried deeper inside the system. And somewhere within those records waited the answer. An answer that would soon connect Vanessa's post to a coordinated pattern of behavior far more serious than anyone expected. The deeper Yosef Ward dug, the less the story looked like a breakup, and the more it looked like a business model. 3 weeks after reviewing the monetization records, North Star's due diligence team received expanded access to archived system logs. Normally, nobody would have cared. System logs were boring. Thousands of pages of timestamps, user actions, technical events, administrative changes. Most people avoided reading them. Yosef loved them. Because logs didn't have opinions. Logs didn't exaggerate. Logs didn't forget. They simply recorded what happened. And what happened was often very different from what people claimed happened. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night when Yosef discovered the first anomaly. The office had emptied hours earlier. Only a handful of lights remained on. Rain tapped softly against the windows overlooking downtown Cleveland. Alicia sat across from him reviewing security reports. The silence felt comfortable. Then Yosef stopped scrolling. A tiny detail caught his attention. One account, one timestamp, one unusual interaction. He opened the record, then another, then 5 more. His focus sharpened immediately. Alicia noticed. Whenever Yosef found something important, he became even quieter. "What is it?" she asked. Yosef didn't answer right away. Instead, he rotated his monitor toward her. "Look at these accounts." Alicia leaned forward. Several usernames appeared. Nothing remarkable at first glance. Ordinary users, ordinary activity. Then she noticed the pattern. The same accounts repeatedly appeared around Vanessa's post. Not occasionally, constantly, commenting, sharing, defending, amplifying, driving engagement, creating conflict, keeping the conversation alive. Alicia frowned. "That's strange." Yosef nodded. "Very." She opened additional records. The pattern became impossible to ignore. The accounts behaved differently than ordinary users. They appeared quickly, reacted immediately, generated unusual levels of activity, then disappeared for long periods, only to return again. The behavior looked familiar, too familiar. Because Ward Analytics specialized in identifying exactly this kind of activity. Alicia slowly leaned back. "Oh." Yosef nodded again. She already understood. The accounts looked coordinated. Maybe not bots, possibly worse. Real people operating under multiple identities, manufactured engagement, artificial amplification, the exact behavior their software had been designed to detect. The next several days became a full investigation. Yosef requested additional records, comment histories, login data, administrative actions, account relationships. Every new document revealed another layer. The pattern kept expanding. Eventually, the investigation identified more than 30 connected accounts. 30, not random strangers, not independent users, connected, coordinated, working together. Many had participated heavily in discussions surrounding Vanessa's post. Several repeatedly attacked critics. Others mocked the unnamed man described in the story. A few actively encouraged harassment. The findings disturbed Alicia. They interested Yosef, because evidence was finally replacing assumptions. One afternoon, while reviewing account histories, Alicia pointed toward a screen. "Look at this." Yosef walked over. The account activity timeline displayed a familiar name. Not Vanessa, Chelsea Grant, the influencer from the Shorby Club dinner years earlier. Several connected accounts interacted heavily with Chelsea's content, then Vanessa's, then other members of the same creator circle. The overlap looked significant. Yosef studied the data carefully, then opened another file, and another. The connections continued growing. Not enough to prove a conspiracy, enough to justify further investigation. A week later, another discovery arrived. This one came from internal email archives. North Star's legal review team had requested communications related to moderation decisions and creator protection programs. Thousands of emails entered review. Most were routine, some were interesting. A handful were explosive. Late one evening, a junior analyst forwarded several messages directly to Yosef. Subject line: potential review concern. Yosef opened the file. The first email appeared harmless. A moderation employee raising concerns. The second looked similar. The third changed everything. The message referenced Vanessa's post directly, not by title, by internal content identification number. Yosef read it twice, then a third time. A moderation employee had flagged the content. The employee believed it targeted a private individual, potential harassment concerns, potential policy violations. The review recommendation suggested reduced visibility, possible removal, standard procedure. The response came several hours later. A manager overruled the recommendation. Creator value considerations, traffic implications, public engagement concerns, review closed, no action. Yosef stared at the screen. The platform knew. At least some employees knew. Not everything. Enough. Enough to recognize potential problems. Enough to ignore them. Because engagement mattered more. The realization settled heavily into the room. Not emotionally. Systemically. Platforms often claimed neutrality. The documents suggested something different. Decisions were being made, specific decisions with specific consequences. The next morning, Yosef forwarded the material to Rachel Harper. Several years had passed since their first meeting. Their professional relationship had continued quietly. Rachel reviewed sensitive matters for both Yosef and Ward Analytics. If anyone could evaluate the legal implications, it was her. 2 days later, Yosef sat across from her conference table. Rachel wore reading glasses and looked thoroughly unimpressed. Not by Yosef, by the documents. She finished another email, then removed her glasses. Well, Yosef waited. Rachel tapped the file. This is getting interesting. Not exciting, not dramatic, interesting. Rachel's version of interesting usually meant serious. She organized the documents into separate folders, one stack, then another, methodical, precise, exactly the way Yosef preferred. Finally, she pointed toward the first pile. Potential defamation exposure. Then the second. Potential unjust enrichment. The third. Potential coordinated harassment concerns. Silence followed. Rachel folded her hands. Individually, each category raises questions. She looked directly at Yosef. Together, they raise bigger questions. Yosef understood. The issue wasn't one post, or one influencer, or one platform. The issue involved systems that rewarded harmful behavior when profitable. Rachel continued. What matters now is proof. Yosef almost smiled. The answer felt familiar. Everything always returned to proof. Rachel opened another folder. The good news. He waited. We're finding it. Over the following month, the evidence continued accumulating. Administrative logs, creator communications, monetization records, review histories. Everything pointed in the same direction. Not necessarily criminal behavior, but deeply problematic behavior. The kind corporations preferred hidden, the kind acquisition teams needed to understand. One evening, Nathan Cole joined a private strategy session. The conference room overlooked Lake Erie. Dark water stretched toward the horizon. Several attorneys participated remotely. Rachel sat beside Yosef. Stacks of documents covered the table. Nathan reviewed everything carefully. When he finished, he closed the final folder, then looked around the room. Do we have enough? The question wasn't emotional, it was strategic. Rachel answered first. For preliminary action, yes, she nodded. Absolutely. Another attorney agreed. A third did as well. The consensus formed quickly. The evidence threshold had been crossed. Not final judgment. Not public action, but enough to proceed. Enough to investigate formally. Enough to enforce policy. Enough to protect the acquisition. Rachel slowly organized the documents, then placed 3 thick folders side by side. The motion felt deliberate, almost symbolic. She pointed toward the first. Fraud-related concerns. The second. Defamation-related concerns. The third. Unjust enrichment and coordinated harassment. The room remained silent. Yosef looked at the folders. Years earlier, people had laughed at him online. Years earlier, he had been told he was going nowhere. Years earlier, he chose not to fight publicly. Now the evidence sat in front of him. Not opinions, not emotions. Evidence. Rachel noticed his expression, or rather his lack of expression. Most people would have felt triumphant, angry, vindicated. Yosef felt focused, because the objective had never been revenge. The objective was truth, and truth required patience. Rachel closed the final folder. then said 4 words that changed the entire direction of the investigation. "Now we have enough." Outside waves rolled against the Lake Erie shoreline. Inside, the next phase was about to begin. Because within weeks, Vanessa Brooks would walk into a creator summit believing she was one of Spotlight Loop's most valuable influencers. She had no idea the ownership structure had changed, no idea who controlled the process, and no idea that Yosef Ward would be waiting inside the same building. Chicago greeted visitors with cold wind and gray skies. The annual Spotlight Loop Creator Summit occupied 3 floors of a luxury hotel overlooking the Chicago River. Hundreds of influencers, marketing executives, sponsors, and media personalities filled the building. Large banners hung from the lobby ceiling. Digital displays rotated creator statistics. Branded stages occupied massive conference halls. Everything looked polished, successful, important, the exact environment Vanessa Brooks loved. She arrived shortly after 9 in the morning. A black SUV dropped her near the entrance. Several attendees recognized her immediately. Photographs followed, handshakes followed, compliments followed. Vanessa moved through the lobby confidently. Years of public attention had trained her well. She belonged in rooms like this now. At least, that was what most people believed. She wore an expensive, cream-colored designer suit. Her assistant carried promotional materials. A sponsorship badge hung around her neck. Conference organizers greeted her by name. One even escorted her toward the VIP registration area. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Inside another part of the hotel, Yosef Ward arrived through a private entrance. No photographers waited. No banners displayed his face. No attendees recognized him, exactly as he preferred. Nathan Cole walked beside him. Several North Star executives followed behind. Security personnel moved quietly through the hallways. The acquisition process had entered its final stages. Public announcements remained weeks away. Only a handful of people understood who actually controlled Spotlight Loop's future. Vanessa wasn't one of them. Neither were most employees. Yosef carried a simple laptop bag, dark navy jacket, gray shirt, no designer labels, no visible signs of wealth. He still looked remarkably similar to the man people once mocked online. The difference existed beneath the surface. Not on display. Never on display. Nathan glanced toward him. Nervous. "No," Nathan smiled. "Good." The summit schedule stretched across 2 days. Panel discussions, creator workshops, executive meetings, investor presentations, and 1 private leadership session closed to ordinary attendees. That final meeting mattered most, but it wouldn't happen until the following morning. For now, Yosef spent his time reviewing reports and meeting quietly with legal advisors. The hotel remained busy, crowded, loud, everything Yosef disliked. By late afternoon he needed air, fresh air, silence, anything away from conference rooms. He left a meeting and walked toward a quieter hallway connecting 2 sections of the hotel. The corridor remained mostly empty. Large windows overlooked the river below. For a few moments the noise disappeared. Then a familiar voice reached him, a voice he hadn't heard in person for years, Vanessa. Yosef stopped walking, not because he intended to speak, because the moment surprised him. Their worlds had remained separate for so long that hearing her voice felt almost unreal. Vanessa appeared around the corner seconds later. She walked beside another creator while reviewing something on her phone. Neither woman noticed Yosef initially. Then Vanessa looked up. Her eyes landed on him. For a brief moment, confusion appeared. Recognition followed. Then surprise. Not dramatic surprise, mild surprise. The kind people experience when unexpectedly encountering someone from a previous chapter of life. "Yosef," he nodded. "Vanessa." The other creator glanced between them, clearly curious. Vanessa recovered quickly. She always had. "Wow!" A small laugh. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I." The conversation paused. Neither seemed interested in extending it. Yet neither walked away immediately. Vanessa looked him over. The same navy jacket, the same calm expression, the same reserved posture. From her perspective, very little appeared different, and because appearances often shaped conclusions, she reached the wrong one instantly. "What are you doing here?" Yosef answered honestly. "Meetings. Business meetings. Yes. Another brief silence. Vanessa smiled politely. The smile reminded Yosef of countless networking events years earlier. Professional. Practiced. Carefully controlled. That's good. She glanced toward his badge. Unfortunately for her, the badge displayed only limited credentials. No ownership information, no executive title, no explanation. Just a name. Yosef Ward. Guest access. Nothing more. The misunderstanding deepened. Are you doing maintenance work for the conference? The question sounded casual, almost harmless. Yet the assumption underneath remained obvious. Yosef noticed. The narrator noticed. Vanessa did not. He answered simply, no. Oh, another pause, then she laughed lightly. Sorry. The apology didn't feel genuine, it felt automatic. The way people apologized after revealing what they actually thought. The other creator shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa continued, I just assumed. Yosef nodded. I know. The calmness unsettled her slightly, because calm people rarely provide useful reactions. Vanessa looked toward the conference hall, then back at Yosef. So you're still in Cleveland? Mostly. Still working on technology projects? Yes, technically true, a massive understatement. Vanessa smiled again. That's good. Another pause. Then came the sentence. The sentence that revealed she still viewed him through the same lens. You always had interesting hobbies. Hobbies, not companies, not acquisitions, not investments. Hobbies. Yosef almost smiled. Not because he felt insulted, because the misunderstanding had become so complete. Years ago, her assumptions hurt. Now they felt informative, nothing more. The conversation should have ended there. Instead, Vanessa added one final comment, the one she would later regret. She gestured toward the hotel around them. Pretty impressive place. Yes. She looked around, then back at him. Must be strange. Yosef waited. Being around all this, the implication hung openly between them. Successful people, influential people, powerful people, people who mattered. The same implication hidden beneath countless conversations years earlier. Yosef met her eyes. What do you mean? Vanessa laughed softly. The answer arrived without hesitation. I mean, these aren't exactly maintenance conventions. Silence followed. Not hostile silence, not angry silence. Simply reality settling into place. The other creator looked away, apparently uncomfortable. Yosef remained completely calm. Because the statement revealed something important. Years had passed, businesses had grown, companies had formed, entire industries had shifted. Yet Vanessa still saw the same version of him, the man from the post, the man she believed was going nowhere. She still didn't understand. And that ignorance would make the next 24 hours far more dramatic. Finally, Yosef nodded. It was nice seeing you. You too. He walked away first. No confrontation, no speech, no correction, nothing. Vanessa watched him disappear down the hallway, then shrugged. The moment seemed insignificant, forgettable, just another unexpected encounter, at least from her perspective. Meanwhile, Yosef entered a private elevator reserved for executive meetings. The doors closed. Silence returned. Nathan stood inside. He had witnessed the final portion of the exchange from farther down the corridor. His expression looked amused. Interesting conversation. Yosef exhaled slowly. Brief. Nathan smiled. Does she know? No. Any idea who you are? No. Nathan laughed quietly, then shook his head. The elevator continued rising, floor after floor, toward a restricted conference suite, toward board presentations, toward final acquisition discussions, toward the future. By the time the elevator doors opened, Yosef had already stopped thinking about the hallway encounter. Business demanded attention, evidence demanded attention, decisions demanded attention. Vanessa remained focused on appearances. Yosef remained focused on outcomes. The difference between those priorities had created everything that followed. And by this time tomorrow, the entire Creator Summit would learn exactly who Yosef Ward had become, including Vanessa Brooks. Because the next morning she would walk into a leadership presentation expecting another routine executive announcement. Instead, she would watch an entire room stand when Yosef entered. The leadership presentation began at 9 o'clock sharp. Unlike the public conference sessions downstairs, this meeting wasn't open to ordinary attendees. No live stream, no audience, no creators recording content for social media. Only senior executives, major partners, key advertisers, investors, legal advisors, and a carefully selected group of high-performing creators. Vanessa Brooks sat near the middle of the room. She had been personally invited. That fact mattered to her. For years she had worked toward access like this. Influence opened doors. Visibility opened doors. Success opened doors. This room represented proof that she had achieved all three. The ballroom itself looked impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. Large digital displays covered the front wall. Conference staff moved quietly between tables. Coffee cups sat beside name placards. The atmosphere felt important. Because it was. Vanessa scanned the room while waiting for the presentation to begin. Several familiar creators sat nearby. Advertising executives occupied another section. Corporate leadership gathered near the front. She noticed Trevor Miles speaking with several attorneys. That wasn't unusual. What felt unusual was the tension. Something significant was happening. People spoke more carefully than normal. Executives checked phones repeatedly. Conversations seemed shorter, focused, purposeful. Vanessa assumed it involved the acquisition rumors. Everyone had been discussing them for weeks. Spotlight Loop's future remained one of the industry's biggest topics. At precisely 9 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The room quieted. Trevor stepped onto the stage. His expression looked serious, professional, measured. He welcomed everyone, thanked sponsors, acknowledged creators, then moved directly to business. We appreciate your patience during a period of substantial organizational transition. The wording sounded corporate, but nobody missed the meaning. The acquisition was real. Trevor continued. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Spotlight Loop. Several people exchanged glances. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. The room's attention sharpened. A large company logo appeared on the screen. North Star Digital Holdings. Most creators knew little about it. Vanessa knew even less. Trevor explained the acquisition process, ownership changes, operational restructuring, governance updates, policy reforms. The information felt significant but somewhat abstract, until Trevor reached the next slide. Effective immediately strategic oversight will transition to North Star leadership. Several executives entered from a side door. Nathan Cole appeared first. Vanessa recognized the name from business news. A few people applauded politely. Nathan took the stage. Introductions followed. Additional leadership acknowledgments followed. Then Nathan paused. The room grew quiet. Before discussing future initiatives, he said, there is someone I'd like you to meet. Vanessa barely paid attention. She expected another executive, another investor, another corporate announcement. Instead, Nathan looked toward the ballroom entrance. The doors opened, and Yosef Ward walked inside. For a second, Vanessa didn't understand what she was seeing. Neither did several others. The man from yesterday's hallway conversation entered the room calmly. Same posture, same reserved expression, same quiet confidence, no hurry, no performance, no attempt to impress anyone. He simply walked toward the stage. Then something unexpected happened. The executives stood, one by one. Attorneys stood. Board members stood. Senior advisors stood. Several investors stood. The movement spread across the room. Not everyone. Enough. Enough to communicate status. Enough to communicate respect. Enough to communicate importance. Vanessa stared. Confusion appeared first, then disbelief, then realization began creeping slowly across her face. Nathan waited until Yosef reached the stage, then spoke clearly. Many of you know me as North Star's public representative. A brief pause. But the strategic vision behind this acquisition belongs elsewhere. He turned toward Yosef. Please welcome Yosef Ward. The room applauded, not wildly, professionally, respectfully, the kind of applause reserved for someone whose authority required no explanation. Vanessa didn't clap. She couldn't. Her mind was still trying to catch up. Yosef stood beside the podium. The same man. The same Yosef. The maintenance worker. The man from the Post. The man she believed had gone nowhere. Only now the room treated him very differently. The silence inside her expression said everything. Yosef noticed. The narrator noticed. Nobody else did. Nathan continued. Yosef serves as principal architect of the technology initiatives that brought North Star and Spotlight Loop together. Another slide appeared. Ward analytics, growth statistics, technology achievements, industry partnerships, major clients, revenue milestones. The room watched. Vanessa stared. Each new slide dismantled assumptions she had carried for years, not through speeches, through facts, numbers, results, evidence, exactly the things Yosef trusted most. The presentation continued. Yet Yosef never mentioned the past, never mentioned her, never mentioned the post. Nothing personal appeared. Only business, only strategy, only future plans, which somehow made the moment even more powerful. Because humiliation wasn't the goal, progress was. After several minutes, Yosef stepped toward the podium. The room quieted immediately. His voice remained calm, measured, controlled. Spotlight Loop has extraordinary potential. No dramatic opening, no grand speech, just direct communication. He outlined operational goals. Trust improvements, creator protections, platform accountability, infrastructure upgrades. Everything sounded practical, reasonable, necessary. Then he reached the section that mattered most. A new slide appeared. Creator Integrity Review Program. The atmosphere changed instantly. Many creators sat up straighter. Advertisers paid closer attention. Legal advisors watched carefully. Yosef continued. As part of the transition process, all legacy monetization programs will undergo independent review. Another slide. Policy enforcement standardization, no exceptions, no preferential treatment, no protected accounts. The words remained simple. Their implications were enormous. Vanessa felt it immediately. Several creators did too. Yosef kept speaking. Public trust depends upon consistent enforcement. Another slide. Accountability initiative. Historic cases. Archived content. Monetization audits. Compensation reviews. Transparency procedures. Every sentence landed carefully, methodically, like pieces of a larger structure. No anger, no accusations, only policy, only governance, only fairness. Yet Vanessa suddenly understood something. The review process wasn't theoretical. It was already happening. The realization settled heavily inside her chest. Across the room, Trevor exchanged a brief glance with legal counsel. The timing had arrived. A notification appeared on several executive tablets, then another, then another. Administrative actions were being implemented in real time. Yosef never looked toward Vanessa. He didn't need to, because the system was handling everything, the way systems should. A few moments later, Vanessa's phone vibrated. She ignored it. Then it vibrated again and again. Finally, she looked down. A platform notification. Her expression changed instantly. She opened it, read it, then read it again. The color drained from her face. Account status under review. Monetization temporarily suspended, access restrictions applied pending audit. The message appeared simple, professional, clinical, yet everyone familiar with the industry understood what it meant, a serious investigation. Vanessa immediately opened the app, navigated toward her account. Everything still existed. Her content remained visible. Then she checked the post, the one that started everything, the one that helped build her brand, the one she had referenced for years. She opened the management options, selected edit controls, then deletion settings. Nothing happened. She tried again. A system notice appeared. Content preservation lock, active records under review. The delete option had been disabled. Vanessa stared at the screen. For the first time in years, she couldn't control the narrative. Not because Yosef stopped her personally, because the evidence had activated a process larger than either of them. On stage, Yosef continued discussing platform improvements, calmly, professionally, as if nothing unusual had happened, which from his perspective was true. This wasn't revenge, it was governance. The difference mattered. And before the summit ended, Vanessa Brooks would learn exactly how much evidence had already been collected. The legal response arrived less than 48 hours after the Creator Summit ended. Yosef expected it. Rachel Harper expected it. North Star's attorneys expected it. Nobody seemed surprised. The email came from Brandon Pierce, a high-profile attorney based in Columbus. Aggressive reputation, expensive reputation. The kind of lawyer people hired when they wanted a problem to disappear quickly. The letter itself followed a familiar formula. Objections, demands, warnings, references to reputational harm, references to contractual obligations, references to possible litigation, several pages of polished legal language attempting to create pressure. Rachel finished reading it, then slid the document across the conference table. "Thoughts?" Yosef asked. Rachel smiled, a dangerous smile, the kind opposing counsel never wanted to see. "My thoughts." She tapped the letter. "He's bluffing." Yosef leaned back. Rachel opened a thick binder, then another, then another. The conference room inside North Star's Cleveland office slowly filled with paperwork. Evidence, records, logs, audit reports. Years earlier, Vanessa's post had relied on assumptions. Now the response relied on documentation. The difference mattered. Brandon Pierce claimed Vanessa had been unfairly targeted. Rachel opened the first folder, system logs. Brandon questioned the account restrictions. Rachel opened the second folder, policy reviews. Brandon challenged monetization suspensions. Rachel opened the third, revenue reports. Every argument encountered records. Every objection encountered evidence. Facts possess a frustrating habit. They remain stubborn, especially when properly documented. Several days later, formal settlement discussions began. Not because North Star feared litigation, because responsible companies explored resolution before escalation. The meeting took place inside a law office overlooking Public Square in downtown Cleveland. Large windows, dark wood conference table, neutral artwork, everything designed to feel professional rather than dramatic. Vanessa arrived with Brandon Pierce. 2 additional attorneys accompanied them. Across the table sat Rachel Harper, North Star counsel, compliance specialists, and Yosef. Vanessa looked different than she had in Chicago. Not physically, emotionally. The confidence remained. Yet uncertainty had appeared around the edges. Weeks of investigation would do that. The audit continued producing findings. More records surfaced, more connections emerged, more questions demanded answers. As everyone settled into their seats, Brandon began speaking. Predictable arguments, professional objections, concerns regarding platform procedures. Yosef listened quietly. The narrator noticed something interesting. Vanessa spent more time watching Yosef than Rachel, perhaps because Rachel represented the legal challenge, but Yosef represented something harder to understand. The reality she never anticipated, the reality she never bothered to imagine. After nearly an hour of discussion, Rachel finally opened the evidence files. The atmosphere changed immediately. The first presentation focused on account activity, coordinated engagement patterns, related accounts, behavior analysis, technical records. Brandon interrupted twice, then stopped interrupting. The data looked solid, very solid. The second presentation focused on monetization, advertising revenue, creator incentive payments, traffic promotion, historical earnings connected directly to the content under review. Numbers appeared on the screen. Tables, charts, documentation, nothing emotional, nothing theatrical, just facts. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly, because numbers are difficult to argue with. The third presentation proved most significant. Internal moderation records, employee reviews, policy concerns, administrative decisions, archived communications. The room became noticeably quieter. Several minutes passed without interruption. At one point, Brandon removed his glasses, read a document again, then read it a third time. That alone told Rachel everything she needed to know. The evidence was landing. By lunchtime, the discussion shifted toward potential resolutions. The legal questions remained complicated. The business questions were simpler. North Star wanted accountability, policy consistency, corrective action, transparency, nothing more, nothing less. The negotiation continued throughout the afternoon. Eventually, the broad outlines emerged. Revenue connected directly to improper monetization activities would require repayment. Certain creator privileges would be permanently revoked. Compliance monitoring would continue. Additional disclosures would be required. Most importantly, a public correction process would occur. Not an apology tour, not a social media spectacle. A correction, a factual record. The distinction mattered enormously to Yosef. Late in the day, Brandon requested a private conversation. Only 4 people remained in the room. Brandon, Vanessa, Rachel, Yosef. The atmosphere felt calmer, more direct. Brandon folded his hands. There may be another option. Rachel waited. What option? Brandon glanced toward Vanessa, then back toward the others. A public apology video. The suggestion hung in the room. Brandon continued. Vanessa can address the situation. Another pause. Clarify misunderstandings. Another. Express regret. The proposal sounded reasonable. Many people would have accepted immediately. Millions of social media users loved apology videos. Brands loved apology videos. Influencers loved apology videos. Public emotions created attention. Attention created engagement. Engagement created money. The cycle repeated endlessly. Rachel looked toward Yosef, waiting. The decision belonged to him, not legally, practically. After all, the original post involved him. Vanessa watched silently. For the first time all day, genuine uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Yosef considered the proposal carefully, then shook his head. No. Brandon frowned. No. No. Silence followed. Rachel didn't seem surprised. Neither did the narrator, because Yosef had never wanted attention. He wanted accuracy. Those were very different things. Brandon tried again. It would help repair the situation, Yosef answered calmly. It would help repair a brand. Nobody spoke. The distinction landed clearly, because it was true. An apology video could generate sympathy, discussion, clicks, narratives. It could become content. And Yosef had spent years refusing to become content. He wasn't interested now. Brandon slowly nodded, apparently understanding. Rachel remained silent, allowing Yosef to continue. Finally, Brandon asked the obvious question. What do you want? The room became very still. Outside, late afternoon sunlight reflected from nearby buildings. Inside, everyone waited. Yosef looked toward the conference table, then toward the evidence folders, then finally toward Vanessa, not with anger, not with triumph, simply with clarity. The truth, another pause, attached to the original post. No dramatic speech followed, no emotional confrontation, only that. The truth attached to the original record, the same record that generated attention, revenue, visibility, years of assumptions. If the story remained public, then the correction should remain public too. Rachel smiled slightly, because legally the request made perfect sense. More importantly, morally, it made sense. The original narrative had traveled everywhere. The correction deserved the same opportunity. Several weeks later, final terms were completed. Compliance reviews concluded. Repayment structures were established. Policy reforms moved forward. Spotlight Loop announced major updates to creator accountability standards. Archived content procedures changed. Monetization oversight changed. Enforcement transparency changed. The platform began evolving, slowly, methodically, the way meaningful change usually happens. Then one morning, Yosef received a message from Rachel, only 3 words. It's live. Yosef opened his laptop, navigated to Spotlight Loop, opened the post, the same one, still visible, still public, still carrying the words that once defined him. But now, something new appeared above it. An official notice, a correction statement, references to disputed claims, policy findings, monetization review outcomes, documented concerns regarding coordinated harassment activity. Nothing sensational, nothing emotional, just facts. The truth finally attached itself to the record. Yosef stared at the screen for a long moment. Years earlier, he almost wrote a response. Years earlier, he almost joined the argument. Years earlier, he almost fought for public approval. Instead, he built, and now the evidence spoke for him. The process should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like closure. Because for Yosef, the story had never really been about Vanessa. It had always been about what came after. And as he closed the laptop, he realized something surprising. For the first time in years, he no longer cared what the post said, only what he planned to build next. The post never came down. That surprised many people. Some expected Yosef Ward to delete it immediately. Others expected North Star to remove it as part of the platform's restructuring process. A few critics even claimed leaving it online was another form of punishment. They misunderstood the purpose entirely. The post remained because records mattered, history mattered, evidence mattered. Deleting the post would erase part of the truth. Keeping it visible with corrections attached preserved the entire story. The original claims remained. The documented findings remained. The audit notice remained. The public could see everything, then decide for themselves. That was the point. One cold morning, several months later, Yosef sat alone inside a conference room at North Star's Cleveland headquarters. A large monitor displayed quarterly reports. Spotlight Loop continued improving. Trust metrics had increased. Advertiser retention had improved. Creator complaints had decreased. The platform wasn't perfect. No platform ever would be. But it was better, and better mattered. Alicia Patel entered carrying coffee, the same way she had done countless times over the years. Some things never changed. She placed a cup beside him. "Good news." Yosef looked up. "There usually is when you smile like that." Alicia laughed. "Fair." She handed him a report. The document outlined the latest progress of a new initiative. One particularly important initiative. Several months earlier, Yosef had approved funding for a digital protection program. Originally, the concept seemed small. A resource center, educational tools, support systems, nothing dramatic. Then the project expanded. Law firms joined. Cybersecurity specialists joined. Researchers joined. Victims joined. The program evolved into something larger, a national initiative helping ordinary people targeted by online harassment campaigns. Teachers, small business owners, students, private citizens, people who suddenly found themselves trapped inside viral narratives they never asked for. Yosef understood those people. He had once been one of them. Now he possessed resources capable of helping. The program became one of the projects he cared about most, not because it generated profit, because it generated value. Alicia pointed toward the report. More than 12,000 users served this quarter. Yosef reviewed the numbers. Impressive, very impressive. He nodded. Good. Alicia smiled. That's all you have to say. Yes. She laughed again. Years later, Yosef still reacted to success exactly the same way, quietly. The following week brought another milestone. North Star opened a new technology campus outside Cleveland. The facility represented years of growth, years of work, years of decisions. The grand opening attracted executives, community leaders, investors, media representatives. Everyone expected Yosef to deliver a dramatic speech, a triumphant speech, a victory speech. They clearly didn't know him very well. His remarks lasted less than 5 minutes. He thanked employees, acknowledged partners, recognized the people who built the company, then stepped away from the microphone. No self-congratulation, no personal mythology, no performance, just gratitude. After the ceremony ended, reporters requested interviews. Most were handled by Nathan Cole. Exactly as planned, Yosef remained comfortable behind the scenes. The role suited him, always had. Several days later, he found himself driving through Lakewood. Not for business, not for meetings, not for strategy, just driving. The same way he used to. The Ford Ranger still existed, a little cleaner now, a little better maintained, but still the same truck. Several employees had begged him to replace it. Friends suggested luxury vehicles. Investors offered recommendations. Yosef ignored all of them. The truck worked. That remained sufficient. Eventually, he turned onto a familiar street. The apartment building appeared ahead. 3 stories, aging brick exterior, small parking lot, nothing impressive. The same building where everything changed. The same building where Vanessa moved out. The same building where Loop Shield evolved from an idea into a company. The same building where countless nights disappeared into code and notebooks. Yosef parked across the street, then simply sat there, watching, remembering. Not with bitterness, not with sadness, just perspective. Years earlier, he believed losing Vanessa represented the worst thing that could happen. Years earlier, the viral post felt devastating. Years earlier, public humiliation felt permanent. He smiled slightly, not because the experience was funny, because it was temporary. Temporary things often feel permanent while we're living through them. The apartment building remained unchanged. Yosef had changed. That was the difference. His phone vibrated. A message from Rachel Harper, short as usual. Settlement complete. Yosef typed back. Thank you. Nothing more. There was nothing left to fight, nothing left to prove. The legal matters had concluded. The audits had concluded. The corrections existed. The evidence existed. The truth existed. The rest belonged to history. As evening approached, Yosef drove toward Lake Erie, a place he always returned to when thinking. The shoreline looked calm. The water stretched endlessly toward the horizon. He parked near a public overlook and stepped outside. Cool air rolled across the lake. The city skyline glowed behind him. The sun began descending slowly. Orange light reflected across the water. For a long time, Yosef stood alone. No meetings, no lawyers, no executives, no notifications. Just silence, the kind of silence he had always preferred. Years earlier, Vanessa had looked at him and seen limitation. A maintenance worker, an old truck, a quiet man, nothing more. Many others saw the same thing. The problem was never what they saw. The problem was assuming that was all there was. People often confuse visibility with value. The loudest person in a room isn't always the most capable. The richest-looking person isn't always the wealthiest. The most impressive story isn't always the true one. Yosef learned that lesson long ago, and he never forgot it. The sky darkened gradually. Lights appeared across the shoreline. The city continued moving. Cars traveled highways. Businesses operated. Lives unfolded. Somewhere online the post still existed. A permanent record, not of defeat, of transformation. The sentence that once defined him had become something else entirely. A reminder, a marker. Proof of how wrong assumptions can be. Yosef looked toward the horizon one final time, then turned back toward the parking lot. Tomorrow would bring more work, more decisions, more projects, more people needing help. The future remained busy, but peaceful, and as he walked toward the old Ford Ranger, one truth remained undeniable. The greatest victory in his life was never becoming more successful than Vanessa Brooks. It was becoming someone whose sense of worth no longer depended on her opinion. The engine started immediately, as always. Yosef drove away, the lake behind him, the city ahead, and for the first time in many years, absolutely nothing left to prove. Some of the deepest wounds in life don't come from strangers. They come from people who once knew us well enough to know exactly where to aim. What happened to Yosef wasn't just a breakup. It was a public judgment. A moment when someone else tried to define his value before he had finished writing his own story. The most important thing he did wasn't building a company. It wasn't buying a platform. It wasn't winning a legal battle. It was refusing to let humiliation decide who he would become. While other people argued, he worked. While other people talked, he documented. While other people chased attention, he focused on substance. Most of us will never buy a social media platform. But many of us have experienced being underestimated. Maybe someone dismissed your dream. Maybe they laughed at your job, your appearance, your background, or the pace of your progress. The lesson isn't that you'll someday prove them wrong in spectacular fashion. The lesson is that their opinion never had the authority to define your future in the first place. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later discovered they were wrong? Share your experience in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow's story is about another quiet person, everyone ignored until one unexpected decision changed the course of an entire family.